It is time for Money Power Politics. The president had hoped the Supreme Court would rule quickly on a case challenging his tariffs, but it has been nearly a month, and so far, nothing. But he is making sure his top economic advisors continue to go out and publicly defend his policies from people who say they're hurting the economy. Today, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent went even further, explaining specifically why he changed his mind on tariffs after being publicly skeptical about them when he was a hedge fund manager. He sat down with Andrew Ross Sorkin at the Deal Book Summit and talked about why he is now on board with Trump's tariff agenda, how, I don't know, one could say he saw the light. Watch this.
Given where you were 2 years ago and where you are now on this issue, would you say, I got it wrong?
I've had an open mind, and that I've evolved on this, and that the president's been right. He told me early on, he said, Scott, the United States is like a department store. Everyone wants to shop here, and only the United States can do what we're about to do.
I'm about to fall off my chair. I almost fell off my chair when I heard that this morning. He also suggested that Trump could recreate his tariffs even if the Supreme Court overturns them, and he mentioned several sections of a 60-year-old trade act that gives the president sweeping powers to negotiate and even reduce the tariffs.
We can recreate the exact tariff structure with 301s, with 232s, with the, I think they're called 122.
But not permanently.
Permanently.
All right, our nightcap is still here. I need to go through this again. So Scott Bessent was not a believer in tariffs, didn't think they were a good idea. He then says, Trump explained to him, we're like a department store, the United States. Everybody wants to shop here. Okay, here's why my mind is blown. Department stores have been in steady decline, borderline crisis for the last 20 years. Department stores? Where? JCPenney? Sears? Bankrupt. Macy's? The best thing they got going on is the parade. I was at the parade going, God, we got to start shopping there again. How out of step is it that that's even the analogy they would use? Not to mention, we are a net importer, not a net exporter. You want to come to the department store of the United States of America to buy all the stuff that we make? There's not much you were going to buy in that store because all the clothing is made overseas. What is your take on the fact that this is Scott Bessent's response? We're the department store. Somewhere the ghosts of A&S and Gimbels are crying.
That's Gimbels.
You're speaking like a true mall girl right there.
Right.
Yes.
Look, Donald Trump is, we never talk about this because it's not the thing, but Donald Trump is the oldest person to ever become president, right? And a lot of times he'll sort of revert into like Gimbels and Macy's.
Mall. Right. Shopping malls are now pickleball courts.
Right. No, the whole thing is fundamentally misunderstanding how all of this works. And honestly, if Bessent is so confident about tariffs, then why are they fighting in the Supreme Court? Why not just let them win and then reinstate the tariffs? I mean, the whole idea, you've seen Trump have every which way to respond to this tariff thing, saying, we don't know how we give the money back. Obviously they're worried about the tariffs. And I do think, it pits the Koch brother against Donald Trump and Leonard Leo against Donald Trump and a Koch brother, which is a very odd match.
Yeah, I think it's sort of fascinating that this conversation happened today when earlier this week the Republican Party could not have gotten a clearer sign that they're in trouble for next year's midterms. And I think that the consensus is, I'll defer to you on the economics here, but the consensus, I think, is that should the tariffs go away, Donald Trump would benefit because prices would go down, the economy would stabilize, and it would be good for him over the long term.
But it would also be the best possible exit that he could say,
right.
I tried to do this, I want to do this.
Exactly.
That dang court.
Exactly.
I mean, it would be the greatest, graceful exit for him.
Exactly. And so to have the administration double down at this point and be like, we're going to do them anyway, is just, from a political standpoint, totally baffling. Like, take the win. You don't even have to call the win, but they don't want to do it.
That's what's amazing. The fact that Scott Bessent almost gleefully, and I was in the room, spitefully sort of walked through, Supreme Court wants to overturn it. So be it. We'll still get it done.
Yeah, and as you know, presidential immunity is also a thing now too. So they don't even need to dig up 60-year-old statutes to try to, create a legal justification. They could issue an executive order or something like that, and then have that, be mired in waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on it. But again, just going back to the the shopping mall analogy. Like,
Isn't that just stunning?
especially for a guy like Bessent, who spent his career in finance, who kind of has some understanding of how these things work, but like to be convinced by an analogy that makes no sense, and he didn't really seem to expand on it anymore.
Well, what was amazing is he was sort of like, don't you understand? The minute Donald Trump announced these tariffs, leaders from far and wide came knocking on our door, begging to make a deal. Business leaders, yes, because this is terrible for the global economy.
Right.
Even if they show up at the White House and say, you're so handsome and smart, here's some chiclets.
Yeah, I think that's how Bessent and any other sycophant in the cabinet would put it. That like, hey, Donald Trump's a man of action. He imposed these tariffs. Everybody said it was crazy, and then people came to make deals, and
they
deals
love
were
the
made.
dance of people bringing gifts. Okay, new topic. When Jay Powell refused to budge on rates, Trump didn't only blame Powell, he also blamed Steve Mnuchin, his former Treasury Secretary, for pushing Powell's nomination. If the next Fed chair disappoints Donald Trump, how ugly could this be for Scott Bessent? Because Scott Bessent is, sort of the commander-in-chief of all things economics. He has made himself that. He is making it clear he's going to have huge influence over who the Fed chair is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, the instant you sign on to be part of Donald Trump's administration in the beginning of January 2025, that's it. You need to understand there's no loyalty that's coming back in your direction. Like, Donald Trump made very clear during his first term in office and before that in his entire career in business, that's not how he operates. Loyalty works one way. And so if Scott Bessent feels as though he got hung out to dry eventually because he nominated a Fed chair who doesn't do precisely what Donald Trump wants him to do, sorry but your luck, Scott Bessent. Like, this is what you signed up for. You signed up for a capricious leader who is going to sell you out as soon as he possibly can because he thinks it's in his best interest to do so.
You get what you get, and you don't get upset. It was stunning to me, though. I watched Scott Bessent, go after the New York Times, go relentlessly today at a New York Times event, and he's there performing for an audience of one.
No, I mean, you get this perverse incentive structure when you work for Trump. I mean, but I want to go back to something that Philip said, which I think is really smart. So the tariffs.
You should, because we try to underline it and circle it. When
That's
Philip
right.
says
I wrote it down.
We like to give him extra credit.
That's right.
Yeah, get a little award.
But, with the tariffs, getting out of the tariffs, this would be the best thing for Trump. And talk about the Obamacare premiums for a minute, right? These Obamacare premiums are going to go sky high. They're going to 50%. I mean,
in weeks from now.
Numbers. It would help the Trump administration so much if people didn't all lose their health care. And that would be the easiest way. And in fact, Jeffries has a discharge petition on the floor for it. And Trump has said he might want, I mean, who knows, because he says something different every day. But it could help him a lot. It would be a seamless out. I don't think he'll take it.
All right, new topic, something else that has helped Trump a lot this year, and that he helped, crypto. Crypto got an enormous boost when Trump took office. We had the Trump crypto exchange, Trump's meme coin, Melania's meme coin, basically a super friendly SEC chair. They stopped going after anything that could be considered, white collar-ish, crime-ish, and they're basically deregulating up a storm. But the major gains in crypto have evaporated. Bitcoin has plunged more than 30% in recent months. We've seen Ether plunged. What is your take? Because many of the people not the hardcore investors, but many people crowded into this because Trump did, right? Even Trump's meme coin has no intrinsic value. People bought it basically as a Trump superfan. The fact that it's tanking, what does that tell you?
Well, I have a piece today at MS Now that
yes,
is about
that's
this.
Why I asked.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yes.
I don't know.
I sent it.
I assume you read all my stuff, but I don't.
Yes.
But I think that one thing that Donald Trump did is that he brought to Washington the ethos of cryptocurrency. And the ethos of cryptocurrency, from its instantiation, essentially, is that we are outside of the boundary of rules. Right?
Yes.
This is part of the appeal. Of course, there's also scads of money to be made from it, which is the other thing that appealed to Donald Trump. But this is the ethos that he brought to Washington. The ethos is defined as second term, is that we exist outside the rules, we exist outside accountability. Crypto's appealing for that and for the fact that it brings in cash. And I think that one of the things that the crypto community, and we've seen sort of hints of this in the past as well, where they're sort of unsure, like when he announced World Liberty Financial, his weird sort of crypto device, whatever it is, that the people were sort of like, this doesn't seem right. People who are like real crypto diehards were like, this is a weird play here, right? Because they
Some
understood.
said this doesn't help crypto.
Correct.
This only makes it muddier and messier.
Correct. And I think those people have been proven fairly correct, right? That Donald Trump's entry into crypto, by elevating that ethos, has also sort of shined a spotlight on it, which I think probably doesn't help the community.